The USSR and USA's relationship throughout the Cold War was a continuous battle for one-upmanship, which saw social, political, and technological developments around the world influenced by the contesting superpowers. Eventually expanding to new territory out of space, further rivalry was inevitable, which manifested itself as the space race. The USA would ultimately be victor of the space race. However, it would be the USSR that would win the lesser recognised space race for equality. After successfully sending Yuri Gagarin, the first man into space, the USSR announced a woman would be sent to space to understand how weightlessness affects the female sex. Many question the credibility of this statement, insisting the vow for equality to be nothing more than propaganda leverage. The first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova, aboard Vostok, successfully orbited the Earth 45 times in 70 hours. Challenging American stereotypes, this changed Americans' perspectives on women in the USSR. The USSR sending Valentina into space was a major event which positively influenced the development of women in STEM research areas today. The USSR did win the space race for equality, however propaganda motives were evident. The space race created much fear and anxiety due to the crossover of space exploration technology being used for military purposes. Satellites used for communication and spying were a new and unfamiliar battleground. The space race became a reflection of the conflicts between the Soviet Union and the United States. The space race in particular saw the USA and USSR both advance successfully in the means of space exploration and technological developments. Many notable achievements were celebrated.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The USA's president at the time, JFK, stated the country's main goal was to land a man on the moon. When this was achieved, the world viewed the space race to somewhat be over, as the USA had accomplished the impossible and in the eyes of the public had essentially won the space race. However, the USSR also achieved many significant milestones and undeniably won the space race for equality, ironically refuting the USA's preconceived notions. It was all about the superiority of one government over another. Space was the most important battleground during the Cold War. The Soviet Union often emphasized racism and sexism of its capitalist opponents, particularly the segregated United States. The director of the Soviet cosmonaut training wrote in his diary as early as 1961, "We cannot allow the first woman in space to be American. This would be an insult to the patriotic feelings of Soviet women," which suggests that the USSR did support women's rights and communism. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev agreed and the search for candidates began. And so the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova, became the 11th human being to cross the frontier of space. No one would man a space mission until 19 years later. Although the USSR used the space race to signal commitment to equality, their motives were combined with the propagandistic value of publicizing the achievements of pioneering women. However, Khrushchev and communism were for women's rights and often slandered their opposing countries for their lack of equality on a broader scale. The Kitchen Debate of July 24, 1959 saw the world leaders debate the merits of American-style capitalist consumerism and Soviet-style communism. As the politicians toured the American model kitchen, Nixon pointed at a dishwasher and said, "In America, we like to make life easier for women." Khrushchev retorted, "Your capitalistic attitude toward women does not occur under communism." The Soviet leader implied that these machines were only trapping the women in the home, says B. Wilson. Although the USSR had underlying political motives in accordance with a culturally diverse space program, the success of first woman, Asian man, and black man in space under the Intercosmos cannot be dismissed. The roles of women changed dramatically throughout the course of history in Soviet Russia, which was often based on the ruler at the time. Nikita Khrushchev was the leader during the early space race period. He was a great supporter of sending women to space and promoting their education in STEM subjects. On June 16, 1963, aboard Vostok 6, Soviet cosmonaut Valentina Tereshkova returned to Earth, having spent more time in space than all US astronauts combined to that date. Tereshkova later toured the world to promote Soviet science and became involved in Soviet politics. Throughout the 1980s, gender disparity penetrated space missions. The American media heavily focused on the femininity of a woman astronaut and how it could affect their quality of work. Disparaging jokes regarding this were common, says the National Geographic. America viewed Soviet women in a sexist way, which Daly points out, saying the USA viewed Soviet women as graceless, shapeless, and sexless and saw that communism is what made the women that way. The USSR, putting the first woman in space, challenged traditional American ideologies and stereotypes. Some American stereotypes of Soviet women were that they were miserable and shabby, however this changed after Valentina Tereshkova went to space. Soviet professional women were female physicians in lab coats, women engineers with their slide rules, even a young cosmonaut in her spaceship, states Tereshkova. Clearly, if the space race was going to be won, America would need to be looking at women in the sciences and make better use of women's minds. The United States have long been trying to one-up each other, whether by the way of weaponry, space travel, or social policies. When it comes to women in science and engineering, the Soviets would ultimately one-up the Americans. According to UNESCO, 29% of people in scientific research worldwide are women, compared with 41% in Russia alone. While 40% of chemistry PhDs awarded in Soviet Russia went to women between 1962 and 1964, the US awarded women only 5% of these awards. In 2012, the same statistic was only 37% in America, which is lower than the 60s in Russia. Analysis of pedagogical journals suggests that girls' quest for advancement in the 1960s was aided by the USSR's standard school curriculum, which privileged the study of maths and hard sciences. Girls also benefited from the generalized efforts by science and maths educators to identify and mentor talented students. The pursuit of equality in Soviet Russia had many long-lasting effects, which is evident in the way women were taught. It seemed women had the same educational opportunities as men, and that when any student was academically gifted, they would be pushed in the right direction, enhancing and making use of such talents. Space race, amongst other asperities of the Cold War, achieved many notable and revolutionary innovations. The common premise is that the USA won the space race on account of the success of Apollo 11, though this doesn't take away from the significance of the USSR advancing women in space, as well as other minorities. The USSR won the space race for equality, owing to those advances. Challenging American stereotypes, the Soviets sparked a shift in traditionalist ideologies, and Americans would begin to think of women in the sciences. The effects of Valentina Tereshkova and the USSR's equality movements would continue to have long-lasting influences regarding the involvement of women in STEM. Whilst challenging other countries to do the same, the impetus for equality was apparent, although propaganda motives were also a large contributor. This, however, does not discount the significant events that did occur, which ultimately paved the path for women in STEM today.